Michael Carter had lived in New York City all his life. At 36 years old, he worked as a subway maintenance technician, spending long nights underground while millions of people above him chased their dreams. Every morning, as the city woke up, Michael would return to his tiny apartment in Brooklyn, exhausted, but proud that he helped keep New York moving. Life had not been kind to him. 5 years earlier, his wife Emily had died from cancer, leaving him alone to raise their daughter Sophie. The loss shattered him. For months, he barely spoke to anyone except Sophie, who was only 7 at the time. Every night before sleeping, she would ask, "Dad, do you think Mom can still see us?" Michael would smile through tears and answer, "Yes, sweetheart. She's watching every step we take." Those words became the foundation of their relationship. As years passed, Sophie grew into a bright, kind teenager, and Michael dedicated every ounce of energy to giving her a good life. Despite working overtime shifts and struggling financially, he never missed her school events. New Yorkers often rushed past each other without noticing the stories around them, but Michael believed every person carried invisible battles. One freezing December evening, after finishing a 12-hour shift, he boarded the last train home. The car was nearly empty, except for a homeless elderly man sitting alone in the corner. Most passengers avoided eye contact, but Michael noticed the man shivering violently. He removed his own winter jacket and handed it to him. The old man looked up with watery eyes and whispered, "Thank you. No one has spoken to me in days." Michael sat beside him and listened as the stranger shared his story. His name was Robert. He had once owned a small business, lost everything after medical bills consumed his savings, and eventually ended up on the streets. Before leaving, Michael gave him some money and wrote down the address of a local shelter. He thought little of the encounter afterward. 3 months later, Sophie received an acceptance letter from a prestigious arts program in Manhattan. It was her dream, but the tuition cost was impossible for Michael to afford. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Michael sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the figures on the paper. For the first time in years, he felt defeated. He considered taking a second job, selling his car, even moving to a smaller apartment. Nothing seemed enough. Then, one Saturday afternoon, someone knocked on his door. Standing outside was a well-dressed attorney holding a folder. Michael assumed it was a mistake. The attorney introduced himself and explained that Robert, the homeless man from the subway, had passed away. Shocked, Michael listened as the attorney revealed an unbelievable truth. Robert had once been a successful businessman and had recently inherited a substantial amount of money from a distant relative. Before his death, he had created a small charitable trust to help people who had shown him kindness during his darkest days. Michael's name was the only one listed. Inside the folder was a letter. With trembling hands, Michael opened it. "Dear Michael," it began. "When everyone looked away, you stopped. When I felt invisible, you treated me like a human being. You reminded me that goodness still exists. I cannot repay what you gave me that night, but I hope this helps your family. Never stop being the man you are." Along with the letter was documentation establishing a scholarship fund for Sophie's education. Michael sat silently, tears streaming down his face. It felt as though fate had reached into his life and rewarded years of quiet sacrifices. That evening, he showed Sophie the letter. She cried as she read it and said, "Dad, Mom always said kindness comes back when you least expect it." The scholarship changed their lives, but the greatest transformation happened within Michael himself. Inspired by Robert's story, he began volunteering every weekend at homeless outreach programs across New York. Sophie joined him. Together, they distributed meals, winter clothing, and care packages. As months turned into years, they became known throughout their community for helping people without expecting anything in return. Sophie eventually graduated from college and became an art teacher. using her creativity to help disadvantaged children express themselves through painting. Michael continued working for the subway system, but now he carried a deeper sense of purpose. One snowy evening, nearly a decade after meeting Robert, he stood on a platform watching passengers hurry toward their destinations. Among the crowd, he noticed a young woman comforting an elderly stranger who looked lost and confused. The sight reminded him of that life-changing night on the train. He realized that kindness spreads like ripples in water. One small act can travel farther than anyone imagines. As he headed home, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophie, containing a photograph of her newborn son. Beneath the picture she had written, "Meet Robert Carter, named after the man who changed our lives." Michael stared at the image and smiled through tears. The city lights shimmered against the winter sky as trains roared in the distance. Millions of stories were unfolding across New York at that very moment. But for Michael, this chapter felt complete. He understood that wealth was not measured in dollars or possessions, but in the lives touched along the way. And somewhere in his heart, he believed Emily and Robert were both watching, proud of the legacy of compassion that continued to grow. The last train home had carried far more than passengers that cold December night. It had carried a moment of humanity that changed generations forever.